Hello people, this is Sonali, the Melodramatic Bookworm. If you've been here before, welcome back, and if you're new to my channel, welcome to the Melodramatic Bookworm family. I'm here today with a video that I've been wanting to do for a long time now, and I keep adding it to my to-do list and I keep saying I need to film this video today, but I just keep putting it off. So today I was like, enough is enough. I am going to finally film this because this is a topic that is so close to my heart, because these books have changed how I see the world. They have changed my perspective on life, and I'm really excited for you to see the books that are on this list that have affected my way of thinking, my way of seeing the world so much. Some of these are not my favorite books of all time. They don't figure on that list, but I love them nevertheless because of the lessons they gave us, because of how they have taught me so many things about life. So without any further ado, let's dive right into this video and let me share with you the books that changed my perspective on life. These books are in no particular order, but the first book that I will talk about today is Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. I read this at a time where I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was into this whole I'm going to travel the world, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to go on solo travels kind of thing. It just impacted me so much. It just made me feel like I mattered, like what I was feeling mattered, and even if nobody is going to acknowledge it, I needed to acknowledge it and to do things that will make me feel better. And it told me that it was possible. Like, I know that the situations are completely different, but when I read the book and saw all the travel, all the new experiences, and all the introvert in me was like, it got hope, and that kind of an impact stays for a long time. It changed how I look at life. Like, that was one of the first changes, and it made me realize that people are malleable. Your opinions can shift, your tastes can shift, and what you want to do at any particular point in time will be completely different than maybe 2 or 3 years later even. This book figures on my favorite books of all time list. Second was a book that I did not expect to affect me the way it did, but it gave me a whole new insight into a person who was seen to be as a sort of a visionary, because he was, and that is Steve Jobs, the biography by Walter Isaacson. And Walter Isaacson is known for his biographies, and this is no different. He has brought together Steve Jobs' life in a way that does not flatter the man. It just puts out all the truths about the man in word format. More often than not, I used to turn up my nose at Apple products, mostly because they were and still are expensive, but I understood better what was going on in Steve Jobs' mind when I read this book. The man was a visionary, like I mentioned before. He had a business mind. He knew what he wanted to offer people. He knew what he wanted to do with the products. He knew what he wanted out of Apple as a company as a whole. He was arrogant, he was rude, but if you just narrow your vision and look at him on the business side of things, he brought about change to the technological world. I'm still not a fan of the man. I'm a fan of what he did, like what was necessary. He could have done it in a much better manner. He could have done it in a much gentler, much compassionate manner, but he didn't. This book doesn't sugarcoat things. It just puts it out there that, see, Steve Jobs was like this. And for me, biographies are also a kind of storytelling, because you're telling someone's life story, and this kind of storytelling is an art, because you have to stick to the facts. You cannot embellish things. And Walter Isaacson in this book has done a fabulous job, it feels like to me, and it impacted me a lot. Next is a classic, which is The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, and this is a story of a man who wakes up one day to find that he has been turned into vermin, and he sees how the behavior of the people around him changes, and it felt like a commentary to me about how mental health is seen and how just some change in your personality to people not seeing you as human anymore. And that is something that I learned about myself, that I could see things for what they were, if at least in that narrative. And this somehow made me see how the world works in a different manner. Not that I was oblivious to the workings of the world before, but this cemented that view, that particular opinion about the workings of the world, about how it treated people, about how it saw differences, and about how society treats people who do not conform to that particular ideal, to their particular ideal. It's a whole patriarchal heteronormative thing, and to see acceptance and moving away from what the society deems as the ideal path, that is rooted in this book. And I absolutely loved it, and it just shifted something inside my brain. Next is The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and this is a short children's book, and in this book it showed us the difference between how children see the world and how adults see the world. It's just one of the many things, but the things that stuck with me is about how visions change when you grow from a child into a teen into an adult, because children are so accepting of everything that's around them. It's the adults that have difficulty adjusting with change, which was in the Metamorphosis as well, but this has such a simple, such an easy, such a beautiful way of saying it. It remains in your mind, and that's exactly what happened with me. It remains today one of my most favorite books of all time. I still think that adulting, life as a whole, seems a tad bit pointless, but in that pointlessness there is beauty, or at least I've started feeling like that. And as a precursor to all of these beautiful feelings, The Little Prince was there laying the foundation. Next are 3 books about feminism that have had a huge impact on me. First is Fight Like a Girl by Clementine Ford. Clementine Ford is very vocal when it comes to feminism and the need for feminism, and she points out every single thing that we take for granted, that we think that, okay, this is fine, this has been going on for years. And she tells us that, look, if this has been going on for years, but why? Look at the underlying reasons. This was the first of her books that I read, and it was just feral. Like, every single page she tears apart another of the walls that patriarchy has built and made us think that, okay, this is your world. But she breaks down those walls and she shows us that the world is much bigger and much more beautiful than what patriarchy and society will have us believe. One of my favorite books of 2020 when I read it, and it still remains one of my favorite books of all time because it's so impactful, it's so fierce. And next is Seeing Like a Feminist by Nivedita Menon. In this book, she combines feminism and caste, and she looks at it from the crossroads of intersection of those two, and how caste impacts feminism and how we need to see it through that lens. There are a lot more layers, be it feminism, caste, gender, all of it coming together, and she is talking about the impact that it has. Is brilliant to read. She compares realities with hypothetical situations. For example, she asks the question, what if men had periods? There would be so much more care. Men would be like, oh, we bleed, we are men, we are men, so we bleed. They'll make this whole motivational kind of thing. They will make that that is what makes them so masculine and all of that. But that isn't accorded to women. It is like seen as something that is impure. So this is just one example, but she brings together all of this in such an impactful manner that it will stay with you. And that is what happened with me. And then it's Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. I read this in March very recently and I loved it. It was, I think, one of the very few 5 stars that I've given this year. And it is one of the most powerfully compassionate books that I've read in a long time. In this, she talks about being a feminist, what it means to be a feminist, and what it is when people say, oh, you're a bad feminist. She has encapsulated everything with such compassion despite calling out so many of the things that we find are normal but are actually problematic. But she also talks about how our journeys need to start somewhere, and just because we are at this point, at one particular point in time, we are not going to be at the same place. We are going to shift and evolve. And just because someone doesn't conform to your ideal of feminism doesn't mean that they are not feminist, because feminist is not just one particular thing. There are so many different ways to be a feminist, and she says that we should all be compassionate about that. And that is something that stuck with me. And these are words, these are sentiments that I carry with me. I've been carrying with me ever since I read this book. It opened up a whole new perspective for me on life, on how feminism as a whole works. After this, I became a fan of Roxane Gay. There's no doubt about it. Next is Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. And in this book, Yuval Noah Harari he decimates human beings for the impact that they have had on the world, and not in a good way. Obviously, like doctors say that this is not good for your health. It's just like humans are not good for this planet. I mean, we are here for whatever reason and all of that, but we have been destroying the world. And in this book, he tells us exactly how we have been destroying the world, and he compares how the human existence has impacted the world, exactly how it has impacted the world, with numbers, with statistics and all of that. And it just shocked me. I think there's video footage also of all of it. I did a subscriber pick, I think it was a couple of years ago. If you'd like to go check that out, link here as well as in the description box below. But it was just so eye-opening in more ways than one. It changed how I look at human beings as a whole, our existence, and what we are doing to the world. There is a lot of good being done to probably reverse everything that has been done so far, but I don't know if that is going to be enough, because there are still, that same line is continuing, and we are killing the world year after year after year. To see how we have evolved or devolved, if you could call it, to see how it has impacted the world that we live in, it was just simply something else. Next is The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes, and this is a book that talks about memory and how memory can shift and change over the years. Like, some things that you remember might not exactly be how you remember them. And in this book, he talks about a group of friends and how a death of one of their friends impacts them, and how years into the future, how they see what happened. This book questioned my own memory. It had me asking myself, like, did that really happen? Like, some of the core memories that I have, it makes me think, but then I'm really sure that it is exactly how I told it the first time around. And it all starts a sort of a loop within myself. So this is something that changed how I look at memory as a whole. Human memory can be like humans themselves. They can be malleable. It can shift and change. It is fluid, it feels like to me. And that is not any human's fault. It is how the brain works. That it isn't exactly relatable, the story, in the plot and all, it's not relatable, but when it comes to memory and remembering things, I was like, are you talking about me? Next is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. I've read the 4 volumes that have been out, and you know how much I love this series. I actually did a full video for this in which I reread this series and I watched the show. If you'd like to go check that out, link here as well as in the description box below. See, I've been an ally since way before I read the Heartstopper series. Heartstopper showed how with love and support people can bloom, and it was just one of the most heartwarming things I've seen. This one didn't change my perspective, it enhanced it, and I'm so grateful for it that shift happened. And this is something that I will always treasure, because Heartstopper doesn't just deal with queer identity and the like. It also deals with mental health, it also deals with eating disorders, it also deals with school life and bullying. There's so much packed into those graphic novels that it just warms my heart every time I think about it, because it is dealt with in such a beautiful manner. And I have a soft spot for Heartstopper as a whole because of what I've said before about how it shows love and support and kindness and healing in the most beautiful manner possible. It's just... oh. Next is Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri, and you had to know that a Jhumpa Lahiri book was coming on this list because it is so transformative. This has fewer than 200 pages, but it was so impactful for me because this is about a female narrator living in Rome, and we see the city, her life, and it just had this different impact on me, especially because of how it sees solitude and how it sees loneliness. Society as a whole sees solitude as something that needs to be corrected, as something that is wrong, that if you want solitude then there is something wrong with you and you have to get it corrected or something. But this book is not like that. It sees solitude as a luxury, it sees solitude as sort of privilege. I totally agree, and just because you prefer solitude doesn't mean that you hate people, and just because you have some standards or just because you have some choices, some preferences that people should not behave like this, they should not behave rudely, that doesn't mean you are stuck up. And this book expands on all of this so beautifully, and for that and for being able to see myself in that book and to see myself and my love for solitude validated, it just showed me that look, there are more people like you, and that is always such a beautiful thing to see oneself in books. And for that I will forever love Whereabouts. Next is Remnants of a Separation by Aanchal Malhotra, and this was also a subscriber pick, I think in 2020, way back in 2020, November if I'm not mistaken. I did a full video for that. If you'd like to go check that out, link here as well as in the description box below. And in this book, Aanchal Malhotra takes us through interviews in which she talks to people about tangible memory. She talks to people who were displaced during the partition through things that they brought along, because there are memories attached to things. And reading this book was such a fantastically heartbreaking experience in its own, because you see what people have been through, you see what people had to go through because of the decisions of someone higher up who didn't have any consideration for what these people would go through. And since then it feels like I have spoken so much about her writing, I have gushed about all of her books, I have shouted from the rooftops that everybody should read Aanchal Malhotra's books. But this is one book that in the 20 or 22 stories that she tells, it just had that heart, it just had that oneness with the people, their pain, their longing for home, their being driven out and still having that thread of connection to their worlds. This is all about books that change my perspective on life, but again this is another book that just built, it just made everything so clear for me to see. It just put everything out there and was like, see, what is the difference? We are all the same. We are all from one blood. And even taking the name of the book reminds me of how much change it has brought within me and how much change it has brought in how I see the world as a whole and how I see history as a whole. So that is a huge impact to have, if you ask me. Long before any modern feminists came out, there was a woman called Virginia Woolf who wrote a book called A Room of One's Own, who had the most interesting things to say. And I don't mean that in the, oh, I can't find anything bad to say, that's why I'm calling her interesting. She is genuinely one of my favorite authors, and A Room of One's Own is genuinely one of my favorite books of all time. During those times, to be a woman in writing fiction or a woman writing in general. There were so many differences in the way people saw men writing fiction and the way people saw women writing fiction, and how men were accorded so much freedom when women were limited by the circumstances, by the gender, by so many other things that brought to the fore society's views on women. She doesn't mince any words when she compares how a woman's writing is seen versus how a man's writing is seen. And she also sets apart the differences between how a man writes, what a man writes about, and what a woman writes about. To see this contrast, to have read this whole book was such an experience for me. I absolutely loved the way Virginia Woolf doesn't hold back. She is so honest, she is so raw in her writing. I never thought I'd become a Virginia Woolf fan, but this was the book that tipped me over the edge and sent me into the Virginia Woolf wave. And this is one of those books which opened my eyes to history. It is a gem on its own. It needs to have a Hall of Fame for itself. I have done a couple of blog posts dedicated to this, fawning over Woolf's writing. If you'd like to go check those out, links will be in the description box below. Next is The Mountains Sing by Yuen Phan Quay Mai. You know how much I love this book. I read it towards the end of 2022 and I absolutely burst with emotions. This is the story of people before, during and after the Vietnam War and how it affected them, about family ties, about keeping that connection to family, about keeping one's ancestors alive by telling stories of themselves. And this was such a wonderful way of telling the story. I mean, there's nothing wonderful about that war or any war for that matter, but the author talks about it with such kindness and compassion. I always use these two words in relation to her writing because she is kind, she is compassionate. Her writing is exactly that. She shows you the war and she shows you the consequences of war, and what it drilled into my mind even further than it was. Like, I've never usually seen it as a concept that is just there. I've never seen it as a reality. I've always been like, oh, but you can make the right choices and all of that. But the author through this book tells us that people can do things during the war that they would never do otherwise. Your morals, your values, everything about you shifts. It's an important thing to remember and to see that in life we don't have control at all times. I mean, sure, there will be people like, it's your life, you have control over it, but extenuating circumstances. So if you haven't read this historical fiction about the Vietnam War, then I'd recommend you to go ahead and read it as soon as possible, because it's something that you should not miss. And last but not the least is the Poppy War series by R.F. Kuang. This is a series, a trilogy in which the author has told the story of military strategy and Chinese folklore and war tactics and all of this, and it comes together in a manner that will fling you around like a rag doll. Throughout this book there is class, there is war, there is action, there are shamans, there are gods, there is war, have I mentioned that before? And there's this whole character development that happens, but it's not in the way that she was here and then she got better and she's here. It's not like she will not make mistakes now that she's better. She is human after all. She could be a shaman, she could be channeling gods, but she is still human after all. And throughout her journey we see the mistakes that she makes, how she admits that she doesn't know anything, and how it is really okay for her to do that, because you don't have to do everything on your own. When you can't handle things, it's okay to ask for help. She is just in her teens when she starts out. To see her grow, to see her evolve, to see her learn things, to see her make mistakes and learn through that, and it changed how I looked at life. Now I'm like, okay, I made mistakes, I will correct them. I am a human after all. I will correct them. And let's move forward from there. Like, now that I've made a mistake, I know what I shouldn't be doing. So that's how we'll grow. And that is my biggest takeaway from the Poppy War series. I mean, the series itself is much more than that. It works on a higher level, a higher plane of thinking, but on the human level, this relatability is what makes it stand out. So those were the books that changed my perspective on life. Which of these have you read? Which ones do you want to read? Which ones did you like? And which books changed your perspective on life? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you like this video, please like it and share it to spread the word. And if you like my content and would like to see more from me, don't forget to hit subscribe and click on the bell icon beside the subscribe button to get notified as and when I post new videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Until next time, keep reading, keep watching, and add melodrama to your life.